Welcome to Valor Conversations. I'm your host, Jay Trainer. Valor Conversations is powered by CSB Ministries and is the official podcast of Christian Service Brigade. For more information, please visit csbministries.org. And now, on with the show. Hello, friends. We continue to venture forward in our series for Valor Conversations called Brigade Tune-Up, gearing our units up for the new ministry year coming this fall. There are, of course, many resources and things available that many leaders are not aware of. And while we want to share these resources with you, we don't always want this to be a quote-unquote how-to guide. We want others to share their own experiences using the resources ultimately available to them. Joining in today is another longtime brigade leader who has had literally several decades of leadership experience. Jim Szczodrowski is the leader of Unit 2047 at Orchard Park Wesleyan Church right in Western New York. He has tons of experiences impacting young men with not only the values incorporated with Brigade, but also the gospel in and of itself. Today, Jim is going to share with us the value of record keeping and the greater impact that can make on a young man's life and the overall ministry. So, Jim, welcome aboard. It's great to have you today. First off, just like I ask every guest in this podcast, let's start off with your introduction to Brigade in the first place and how you got involved as a leader within it. In other words, I want you to share with me and the audience your Brigade backstory just a little bit.
Oh, thanks, Jay. I've been a brigade leader for 44 years, and I've been fortunate to serve pretty much at every level. Tree climbers, stockade battalion, chairman, treasurer, chief ranger, post ranger. I mean, you name it, I've done it. I was also a 35-year staff associate with Brigade. I joined Brigade when I was 10 as a boy. A friend actually, or an acquaintance actually invited me on a school bus one day. Want to know if I wanted to come to his club called Stockade. Never heard of it before that, had no exposure to it. Went home, asked my folks, and they said sure. So at that time, it was Tuesdays. They drove me up, and I got involved. I came through Stockade, joined battalion, came through that. When I was done with battalion, I just assumed, well, that was fun. Now it's time to grow up and go and do adulting, whatever that meant. Well, not long after I left, battalion as a young guy, I ran into my battalion captain, which I never did before, not once. And he just came up to me in the hardware store up in town and says, you should be a stockade leader. Well, I was polite and told him, yeah, I'll think about it. Good to see you, Bruce. I'll see you later. Left, didn't give it another thought. The next day, I had to go to the same hardware store for work. I had to get something. I ran into Bruce a second day. Now that's twice that I ever ran into the guy in the 10 years I knew him. And he told me the same thing. I was polite, totally dismissed it once he turned around and walked away. A couple days later, went to another store, again for work during lunch hour. I run into Bruce a third time. And he told me the same thing. He goes, look, you're supposed to be a stockade leader. Bob, who was the chief ranger at the time, he needs the help. You're the man for it. Well, I'm not too not bright. And I figured, well, I'll look into it. I'll go talk to Bob and, dismiss it. Well, talk to Bob. I started as a stockade leader. Worked here for a couple of years in Orchard Park as a stockade leader in the same stockade I came through as a kid. And it was time to move to college. I went to college in New York City. I worked for a few years to save money. Just before I went there, I was working at our local brigade camp, Hickory Hill. And the camp director at that time was Ralph Essery, which was a regional director for Metro New York, Long Island, that area. And he told me there's a stockade in New York City. They need you as a leader. Well, I didn't give a thought of that. I was going to college, working the whole routine. I had no interest in being a stockade leader anymore. Besides, it's in the middle of New York City. I don't know how it worked. Well, it stayed with me that I should talk to the people. I went down to talk to them. Now, when I say it was New York City, it was in an area called Hell's Kitchen, which was right off Times Square. It was a gang area. It was not the nice Hell's Kitchen that's there now, which a lot of people still wouldn't walk through. It was a bad, bad area. And here I am from Orchard Park, walking down to Hell's Kitchen, where I lived right on the fringe of it, but I didn't go into it.
Hmm.
I met with the people there. It was in a tenement building, 4 or 5 story tenement building on West 51st. It was actually a mission.
Oh, wow.
And the guy told me, he goes, look, I need a stockade leader. And prior to that, when I saw the building, I walked around the block trying to tell God, yeah, this isn't for me. No, no interest in this. Where's the gymnasium? Where's the lawn? Where are we going to play games? This place certainly doesn't look like it can finance anything. Which I came to find out they couldn't. Our yearly budget was $50.
Wow.
And I walked around the block talking out loud. I looked like one of the people on the street, and it just kept coming back to me. No, you're the guy. You're supposed to do this. Well, that was the best decision I ever made. Everything I learned about ministry, I learned at that stockade and battalion group.
Wow.
It was unlike any other group I've ever seen. We had one boy get stabbed during the meeting by another boy in the group. Fights on the street. We'd see people pull guns.
Wow.
I mean, it was just a rough area. And I was there, spent a number of years there, moved back to Orchard Park after college, and they were discussing the very day I got home from college, graduated, all fresh and new. And the leaders at Orchard Park asked me to come to a meeting because they were discussing dropping brigade in the church. And the leaders were for it.
Wow.
They didn't see the results. They didn't have any enthusiasm. What it was, the leaders were wore out. They were men that have been doing it for years. They didn't want to see it die.
They were tired.
They kept doing it. They were just tired. They were wore out. They had 15, 20 years in or more.
Yeah.
And they just wanted my viewpoint. And I was telling them, look, brigade works. I just came from Hell's Kitchen where they have nothing and it's thriving there. There's no reason it shouldn't be thriving here. And once we looked at it, we realized the guys were burned out. They weren't using proven materials. They weren't using the proven structure of brigade. They weren't using everything that brigade offers. So their ministry was next to nothing. Well, we ended that year in June with 9 boys. When we restarted in September, we started with 33.
Wow. Quite the jump.
Quite the jump with very little effort. So yeah, everything I've learned, that's my brigade story, but everything I learned pretty much by fire.
Wow. That's an incredible backstory, just with regard to your exposure into it, not only as a student through it, as a young man through it. Now you have been able to give back and pour back based upon your collegiate experience down in the New York City area. That's amazing to me. So let's talk about the uniqueness of your group for a few moments. I know we've talked about this outside of this recording, but I think it's good for our audience to hear it too. What percentage of the young men that come to your unit are quote unquote churched, and what percentage that come are ultimately from the community? And why don't you talk for a few moments about the dynamics of how that has shaped your ministry ultimately compared to maybe other units that you've been exposed to?
Well, we've been called a lot of things, never unique. That's one of the nicer adjectives.
Okay, there you go.
Well, this year, and it's a little bit odder this year with COVID, 80%, routinely 80% or more of the boys in our brigade, and the last bunch of years we're running 2 stockade groups in a battalion. 80% of the boys are from outside of this church. 3/4 of those boys are from outside of any church.
Wow.
The past few years with COVID going on, 90 to 95% of the boys are from outside of the church. And an even higher percentage are from outside of any church.
Wow.
Which I've just found astounding. But usually our minimum is usually 75 or 80%. I mean, part of the reason is we draw boys from a large area, even though there's 2 other brigade groups within single-digit miles. There's one 5 miles down the road, and there's one 2 miles past there. Then you go in the other direction, there's one less than 10 miles away.
Okay.
but we get some boys from 45 minutes away
Wow.
down in the southern tier, which is quite a ride.
Absolutely.
The dynamics in the group are, yeah, it's different, especially when we see other groups at regional competitions. And
Okay.
both are legitimate, but with our boys here, especially with so many outside of any church boys, we're starting at the basics because in most homes now, they don't have a Bible.
Right.
They don't know New Testament, Old Testament. They don't even know Easter, crucifixion, Christmas, birth of Christ. They've heard the terms, but they don't know it.
The basic
can't-
stories, the
Right.
basic foundations.
We
Yeah.
can tell the boys John 3:16, but there's no context for it.
Hmm.
They don't know how to look it up. They don't know why they would look it up. So, I mean, we're really starting with the basics.
Hmm.
They don't own a Bible. Do you need a Bible? Do you want a Bible?
Hmm.
And that's starting at pretty low level, but the flip side of that is they're hungry.
Hmm.
So that's the other side. We don't have many kids that can just spout the answers off because they've heard it from mom and dad and heard it from church and heard it from Sunday school. So they're hungry. So that's a little bit different dynamic. The other dynamics are with the boys being unchurched, it's a fertile field to sow.
Absolutely.
Through the years, we've had well over a dozen guys become pastors.
Wow.
The majority of them were unchurched. We've had guys become missionaries, full-time Christian workers in Young Life and things like that. We had one boy join Stockade years ago, and his goal was to see if he could get me ticked off enough to throw him out of the group.
Wow.
His parents disliked me, or his father disliked me so much, he hired a private investigator to try to jam me up.
Wow.
Well, this guy now is probably the most dynamic pastor I've ever seen, and is the pastor of a church of 1,500 people that he started in a beer hall.
Wow.
And things like that. One of the guys that became a pastor, he was the first one to start our building on fire, and it was on purpose.
Okay.
Another boy stabbed another kid in Stockade. He's now a street preacher in Brooklyn.
Wow.
We've got at least a couple that are PhD professors at Christian colleges.
Incredible.
Because we have so many outside the church guys and parents really don't know us, threats aren't uncommon.
Okay.
I had a dad show up at my door less than a year ago who wanted to punch me out. Now I talk to him, he'll shake my hand and say hi. But it's a different time and age than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
It's completely different. With having so many outside the church guys, it's just an entirely different dynamic. We have to be very clear with everything with the parents when you're in the church. And we've had years where we've had a lot of church kids. They just accept a lot of it because it's the church. Well, outside families look at a church, especially a boys' ministry, unfortunately, with suspicion.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons. Well, we tell parents. I had a mom call me yesterday, brand new mom, already calling for September. I don't even know where she got my number from. But, and I let her know, open door policy. You can come by at any time to see what we're doing. All of our leaders, of course, are background checked, et cetera, et cetera. But you want references on any of the leaders. You want references on the group. You call the church office. They will give you the list of all of our members for the past several years. You can call any number. Some of them do, some of them don't. But we've learned by making that offer that drops a lot of the suspicion. And again, unfortunately, at this time, we need to be very upfront.
Well, and you talk about the open book policy, and of course, record keeping plays a role in that. And I'd like to ask you just kind of, when did you find record keeping essential to your ministry? And I know for some, it might be incorporated within somebody's personality type where it comes naturally. Yeah, let's keep all these records, and they thrive that way. For others, it has to be more on purpose or intentional. And also, so where do you find yourself on that spectrum? Does it come to you more naturally to want to keep records, or are you more having to be intentional about it, thinking through that, especially with regard to the context of needing to keep an open book policy, as you have said?
Oh, very intentional. This is in no way part of my makeup.
Okay.
I don't like desk work. I don't like book work, but I
protects
learned
the ministry.
many years ago, you need the information. When I took over brigade up here, and the men were wonderful. They were great leaders who influenced hundreds of boys. They didn't have a phone list for the boys.
Wow.
They didn't have a contact list.
Wow.
You needed anything. They might have it, they might not. But I always had the theory, I want to know our boys. I want to know A, B, and C. Our attendance sheet. We do attendance. A lot of groups do attendance. We have a color-coded spreadsheet. When boys miss, things turn a certain color. Because by keeping track, we've learned if a boy misses 2 weeks in a row, it's 50-50. He misses a third meeting. If a boy misses 3 meetings in a row, there's a 75% chance he misses a fourth meeting. He misses a fourth meeting, you've only got 25% or less of getting that boy back in the year.
Wow.
If they miss 5 meetings in a row, odds are you're never going to see that kid again.
Wow.
I don't want to lose the guys. I mean that's the black and white of it. And by keeping the records, we have that. So we have a system in place. I look at the spreadsheet on the computer. It's color coded. I can see who's here or who's missing meetings very, very easily. Well, that boy gets a postcard in the mail.
Okay.
Hey, sorry, we've missed you at Stockade. Hope things are well. See you next week. He misses 3 weeks in a row. The parents get a note. Sometimes the phone call, but parents don't like answering phones anymore. They might get a text. And by doing that, especially if they miss 4 meetings, we may find out the boy's bombing out in school.
Okay.
Maybe a job situation switched where the parents can't drive the boy. An issue with the family where maybe the parents split, and mom just has enough juggling things. Well, by keeping track of it, we've been able to arrange rides if the boy needs it. We could drop him off if the boy needs it, if the family needs it. Whatever, by keeping track and having that information at hand, we have a better handle on who's here and making sure they stay here. Because there's nothing worse than investing a lot of time and a lot of months into a boy just to see him disappear and you never hear from him again. The first few weeks of our stockade and battalion meetings, we take pictures of each boy. Those get put on a sheet, like 10 or 12 up on a sheet, gets printed out with their names. The junior staff, especially the team leaders, they have 2 weeks to remember 75% of the boys by sight.
Wow.
And they are tested on it. And it is not a happy day if they don't pass it, because they will have another chance, but they pay a price for it. The adult leaders don't get tested, but every single adult leader before the meetings will be up here looking at their sheet, looking at the names, because there's nothing better than for a boy to be at a little league game or walking around or getting ice cream, running into a stockade leader, and they say, "Hey, Ryan, how are you? You remembered the boy's name when you may have a whole building full of kids." That makes the kid feel important.
Or if you're at the local hardware store, like in
and you're running to your leaders. The other thing with records is, it's always amazed me how few groups really have a handle on finances. Now, I don't know of any brigade group that has the finances that they really need. None of us do, but it really helps when you can go to your church or show the parents, like, I know my 3-year expense in our brigade, it costs us $174 per boy per year in expenses.
Wow.
10 years ago, it was $137.24 in expenses. But we break it down. Everything is for a per boy cost. That way, if we have an activity, like we have all-nighters, well, we charge $5 for the all-nighters to cover the pizza.
Okay.
Well, there'll be some parents who will say, well, why are you charging? Well, here you go. Our finances are on our website. We report to the church. The church gets copies of everything. Since we're able to show everybody exactly where every cent goes in the group, money's always tight because we always find new ways to spend it.
Right.
But it gives you, for lack of a better word, ammunition for when you need something, go to the church. Hey, this is what we're spending. This is where it's going. These are our records. We need A, B, and C.
Well, and it contributes to that open book policy that you
Right.
have, which is essential. So moving on to some of these more specifics, you've talked about some of the specifics of what you've done and what is involved with Unit 2047. Let's talk about the fruit. Okay. How has this been fruitful to your ministry overall? And do you have any stories that you can touch upon about how some of the young men have been impacted by your record keeping efforts?
Oh, that all ties together into everything else. I mean, it's all so interlinked. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The record keeping is built into the relationship making because you know the boys. You've got the records in our attendance sheet. It shows each boy's birthday. It gives you a reminder, to wish them a happy birthday. I mean, now it may be a text to mom and dad. I won't text boys directly.
For obvious reasons.
For obvious reasons.
100%. Yes.
But just the fact that you're doing it, but the fruit for the contact for the record keeping, it's enabled us to build stronger relationships with our boys. And everything in brigade, everything in ministry is relational. Everything. It's just one more tool to strengthen that relationship because relationships are getting more difficult to build, not easier. Churches are struggling more to build relationships. It's not getting easier. People cocoon, they stay home. They don't talk on the phone where they used to. They text. They don't even email anymore. They text. The way we keep in contact with our parents is through texting now.
Yeah.
We mail next to nothing. So we signed up with a texting service for $10 a month.
Oh, that's fantastic. What is that service? So maybe our listeners might know what's the name of that?
Give me 1 second. I believe it's pastorsline.com. I can email you this information.
That would be great. Yeah, and I'll put it on the description.
Same thing if anybody wants any of our spreadsheets that we do for attendance, that we do for anything. Anybody's welcome to anything if it's going to help them.
Excellent.
We want to strengthen brigade and strengthen the ministry. The other things with record keeping, how it's structured things is we get to know the boys, we get to know them on a deep level, and the amount of guys that we hear from and I hear from 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago and 40 years ago is astounding.
Yeah.
It's just astounding.
Literally decades. Decades.
Yeah. And unfortunately, just recently, I attended the 9th funeral of a former stockader.
Wow.
Which I never thought that would happen. But nine boys that came through stockade with me are gone. And that just sets that we have these guys for such a brief time. I want to know who they are. We need to know who they are so that we can reach, teach, and impact them, because none of us are guaranteed any certain amount of time.
Right.
And I never in my life thought that we would be, I'd be attending 9 funerals, 9 weddings. Yeah. Hit that number decades ago, but not 9 funerals.
9 funerals. Yeah.
Wow. That's just astounding. And the rest with how it's impacted with doing the record keeping, it's identified our group. It's very clear who we are and what we do.
Yeah.
Between record keeping, promotion, the follow up with postcards, phone calls, contact, it all feeds off each other. If you want to grow your brigade, you need to know your boys. You need to be doing record keeping. You also need to be doing promotion.
Yeah, we were going to talk about that, right? That's something that you mentioned to me, the importance of that. And I think a future podcast of that is essential. But talk about the record keeping element with promotion and follow up as well.
Yeah, well, promotion ties into knowing your boys. We know we get boys from this size of an area.
Hmm.
That might be different than the brigade down the street.
Fair
You know,
enough.
different styles, different leaders, different church.
Right.
You know, my church is less than 200 people.
Wow.
You know, our brigade this year is 60 some odd boys all total.
Oh, wow.
You know, and you know, it's not our smallest, it's not our biggest. Our biggest was 140 some boys.
Hmm.
You know, our smallest was 30.
Hmm.
You know, so I mean, big range depending on the year, but this year we're pretty much average. But we know the boys, so we know how to contact them. You know, we use postcards, we use banners, we use street signs. You want to attract a boy to Stockade, it used to be, or battalion, it used to be word of mouth.
Right.
It's not the same anymore. I asked a couple of my 10-year-olds after Christmas break this year, well, how was your break? You know, how was your 2 weeks off? You know, blah, blah, blah. And they were saying, great, they hung out with their friends.
Hmm.
So I was asking, well, you know, did you go sledding, you know, skiing, you know, whatever? Well, no, they played video games.
Huh.
I go, your friends came over to play video games? They go, no, we hung out though. Well, they hung out through Xbox or PlayStation, through the microphones and headsets.
Right. Through the internet.
They
Yeah.
consider that hanging out now. And that surprised me.
Hmm.
You know, I know video games are pretty prevalent, but that's replaced the face-to-face.
Hmm.
Some of these guys don't hang out face-to-face with kids unless they're someplace like brigade.
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
that's just always surprised me.
Absolutely. Huh. So the idea of all of it being intertwined is significant and huge, and people would do themselves a favor if they miss out on the opportunity to record keep. Say it's a new brigade leader of some sorts, and so as we begin to finish up our time together, I know that record keeping in and of itself can sound like a dull and boring subject matter, but if someone were to just be starting off in this area, what advice would you give that individual, that leader that may not be good with this ideal? And where can one even start with the amount of records that can be kept in the first place?
Well, you keep it simple. I mean, it's not that we keep a lot of records, we keep attendance. That's number one. That
Hmm.
tells us who's here and who's not. We all work. You know, I don't know of any brigade leader that gets paid to be a brigade leader.
Fair
It
enough.
would be great, but that's a whole different discussion.
That is a whole different
But
discussion. That is for sure.
you can, if a boy's not there for a few weeks, all of our meetings are hectic enough where you could easily forget about him.
Hmm.
I don't want to forget about him.
Yeah.
You know, he's part of our charge. He's part of our ministry. I want to remember. You'll take care of the attendance. You know, it's not that hard. Yes, it's not glamorous work. It's not as fun as getting out in dodgeball when you're with the kids, or taking
Right.
a group of kids camping, or Pinewood Derby. Yeah, we both love the Pinewood Derby,
Absolutely.
but the records, the place to start is take attendance.
Hmm.
You know, and really do it in a way where you know who's there and who's not. Where are they from? You know, keep track of money. You know, money, poor management of money can sink a ministry.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
You know, and none of us want that. You know, you just don't want it. My goal every week in brigade is really modest. It's to avoid a train wreck of a meeting. That's it. That's our whole goal. Anything after that is a bonus. We want to send home the same number of boys that showed up in the same condition, more or less.
Fair enough.
If your boys are like mine, you know, to people listening, you look at the boys a lot of times and you shake your head thinking, what is the thought process going on in there? You know, or is there really one? You get frustrated when you don't see anything positive developing in them.
Hmm.
I've got a binder on my desk with the names of all the boys that have come through our brigade here since 1979. Every single member. In my office, I've got pictures, you know, of all sorts of groups. Well, yeah, when you get discouraged, look at those names and you're going to still remember some of them. You're going to realize, yeah, some of these guys did okay.
Hmm.
They're doing okay. Brigade had a little part in it. Some of these guys went on to preach the word, to be pastors, to be good husbands, good dads. Well, they may not have had a good dad example.
Hmm.
They may not have had a good family example. but through brigade, they did. And that gives you the encouragement to keep going. You got to find humor in all the situations. None of us knows the future that holds for these guys. Like I said, I just attended my 9th funeral for a former stockader. Never in my life would I have envisioned that. Years ago, I received a letter from one of my battalion leaders when I was a teenager. And I still have it. I keep it in an envelope in a desk. And I laugh because it was a letter from him saying, "Oh, I hear you're involved in brigade." You know, he moved away years ago to a different part of the country. And he goes, "I find that amazing." He goes, "I heard you ran a group in New York City. That's even more amazing. I heard you were a Christian, and I'm astounded because you were the last person I ever would have thought to be a leader, let alone a Christian leader in a ministry."
Wow.
And I thought that was really cool because that showed brigade in action.
Yeah.
You know, he looked at me, he didn't see it, but we've got a God that can still use somebody that didn't have those skills.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm fortunate. I've been doing this long enough. I've seen enough good things come out of this ministry. Until you're doing this for 15, 16, 17 years, you get frustrated because you don't see the results of it, nor should we expect to. We're not promised that. But to be able to be in it and see the results, you know, wow.
Yeah.
You know, to be blessed to see what happens and all that's amazing to play a part in these boys' lives. You know, just amazing.
Yeah. Context is everything there. And I think we have to remember, like you said, that's such a good, important lesson that this is not a sprint. It is a marathon. It is something that you're not always going to see instantaneous results. In fact, you probably won't. You're going to have the frustrations are going to outweigh the appearance of blessings. But if we're in it for the longevity, then we will see fruitfulness of a lifetime of legacy that is ultimately poured out. So Jim, as we again wrap up, any final thoughts or final words that you might have to share with our audience today? Kind of a free, open-ended question, so to speak.
Know that you're not alone in this ministry. I mean, it's been a rough few years for all sorts of reasons. COVID be a big one. You know, ministry has been very hard to run. I mean, I've got an awesome group of guys on the leadership team with me, and we're just tired from COVID stuff. The boys aren't acting the same, anything else, but they're still here every time we have a meeting. You know, parents are appreciative. We're reaching into homes. The more we get to know the boys, the more we know we're making a difference, even though we're not entitled to know that. You know, we're hearing from guys that came through the group, guys that were going through real struggles in their life, and brigade and our church were able to help them get through it. You know, we've got a big God. We got a God that's going to meet our needs, and he's going to reach these boys. You know, and it really is an honor to be able to do that. You know, hopefully your church has a sense of humor. My church so far has.
That's good.
You know, that's always a good thing when you have a bunch of boys. You know, and you know, you just need to look at the big picture. You know, what we're doing, we're not just making birdhouses or making race cars. There's a reason behind it. You know, remember the reasons, remember the big picture, because it's worth it. I couldn't think of anything better to be involved in than this.
It's awesome. Well, thank you, Jim, for your time and your willingness to discuss matters like this one. I know it isn't the most popular attribute, or as you called it, a glamorous type of endeavor, but it is essential. It's foundational. And I look forward to our paths crossing in the future and working together soon. Thank you again. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks for tuning into Valor Conversations with your host, Jay Trainer. Valor Conversations is powered by CSB Ministries and is the official podcast of Christian Service Brigade. For more information, please visit csbministries.org. And in the meantime, stay tuned for more Valor Conversations coming your way soon.